Good evening, fellow travelers into the unknown. Welcome to Whispers at Night, where the ocean's darkest secrets find their voice. Tonight, we're setting sail, not into tales of sea monsters or curses, but into chilling, true accounts from within the gleaming worlds of cruise ships. These floating cities promise luxury, yet hide corridors of terror. From passengers to seasoned crew, you'll hear 7 stories of isolation, fear, and the kind of horror that strikes when you're miles from help, and there's nowhere left to run. If you dare to confront the shadows, subscribe and ring the bell, so you never miss the darkness when it calls. Now, let's board. My life, for as long as I could remember, had been a symphony of flavors, a canvas of culinary artistry. As an executive chef, I had honed my craft in Michelin-starred restaurants across the globe, my reputation built on innovation, precision, and an unwavering commitment to the finest ingredients. The kitchen was my sanctuary, a place of creation and passion. So, when I received an offer to become the executive chef aboard the majestic Voyager, a new ultra-luxury cruise ship promising an unparalleled dining experience, I saw it as the pinnacle of my career. I envisioned a floating gastronomic paradise, a place where I could push the boundaries of haute cuisine, catering to the most discerning palates. I was prepared for demanding clients, for exotic ingredients, for the relentless pursuit of culinary perfection. I was not prepared for the unspeakable horror that simmered beneath the ship's polished veneer. The majestic Voyager was indeed a culinary marvel. Her main dining rooms were vast, opulent spaces, adorned with crystal chandeliers and gleaming silver. Her specialty restaurants offered a dizzying array of international cuisines, each meticulously crafted. My kitchen, a sprawling state-of-the-art facility, was my kingdom, staffed by a brigade of talented chefs from every corner of the world. Captain Andrews, a man of imposing stature and a surprisingly refined palate, often frequented my kitchen, offering praise and subtle suggestions. My initial weeks were a blur of menu planning, ingredient sourcing, and the joyous chaos of a busy, high-end kitchen. Everything was, by all appearances, a dream come true. It was during the second month of my contract, as we sailed through the remote, uncharted waters of the South Pacific, that a chilling anomaly began to surface. I noticed a series of unusual requisitions for ingredients, rare, exotic meats that were not all, and any of my approved supplier lists, nor were they destined for any of the ship's advertised restaurants. These requests came directly from Captain Andrews, bypassing all standard protocols, and were always accompanied by a stern warning of absolute discretion. My questions to the ship's purser, a man who usually prided himself on transparency, were met with a nervous, almost terrified silence. "Captain's orders, chef," he'd stammer, his eyes darting away. "Highly confidential. For a private dining experience." The unease grew, a sour taste in my mouth that no amount of exquisite food could dispel. One evening, driven by a gnawing curiosity and a chef's inherent need to understand every ingredient that passed through his kitchen, I decided to follow a delivery of these mysterious meats. It was late, the ship's main areas hushed, most passengers asleep. The delivery led me to a rarely used service elevator, descending deeper than any passenger area into the very bowels of the ship. The air grew heavy, thick with a strange metallic scent, a smell that was disturbingly familiar, yet utterly out of place on a luxury liner. I found myself in a hidden corridor, dimly lit, leading to an unmarked steel door. A faint hum emanated from within, and I could hear hushed voices, punctuated by the rhythmic thud of a cleaver against a cutting board. Peering through a narrow crack in the door, my breath hitched, and a scream caught in my throat. Inside, bathed in the harsh glare of industrial lights, was not a pantry, but a clandestine kitchen, and on the gleaming stainless steel tables, laid out with chilling precision, were cuts of meat that were unmistakably human. My mind reeled, struggling to process the grotesque reality before me. This wasn't a private dining experience, it was a cannibalistic restaurant. and then I saw him. Laurent Dubois, a mysterious Frenchman who had been a frequent, enigmatic presence in the captain's private dining room, was overseeing the macabre preparations, his eyes gleaming with a perverse satisfaction. And standing beside him, giving orders, was Captain Andrews himself, his refined palate now revealed as a monstrous appetite. He was not just aware, he was the architect of this unspeakable abomination. I stumbled back, my hand instinctively clamping over my mouth to stifle a gasp. The faint creak of the floorboards was enough. Dubois and Andrews' headset napped towards the sound. I was caught. They dragged me into the hidden kitchen, the stench of raw human flesh overwhelming my senses. Dubois, his voice a silken whisper that belied the horror of his words, explained their operation. The majestic Voyager, this beacon of luxury, was a meticulously designed front for a secret, high-end restaurant, catering to the most depraved appetites of the world's elite. My culinary skills, they revealed, were not just appreciated. They were essential. "Your artistry, chef," Dubois purred, his eyes fixed on mine, "will elevate our unique offerings." They offered me a choice, a horrifying ultimatum delivered amidst the chilling tableau of human remains. I could continue my role, my culinary artistry now a tool of unspeakable depravity, and receive a substantial share of the immense profits. Or I could become one of their ingredients, another anonymous dish on their macabre menu. They spoke of discreet disappearances at sea, of untraceable accidents. The message was clear: cooperate or become the next course. I agreed, my soul screaming in silent protest, knowing that my survival, and perhaps the chance to expose them, depended on my unwilling complicity. For the remainder of the voyage I played my part, a chef in hell. I cooked, my hands trembling, my mind a maelstrom of revulsion and terror. I learned the intricate details of their network, the coded orders, the secret passages where the special cargo was brought aboard. I discovered that the majestic Voyager was just one vessel in a much larger global network of cannibalistic restaurants, catering to a clientele so wealthy and powerful that they believed themselves above all laws, all morality. When we finally returned to port, the familiar scent of land a bitter irony, I had gathered enough evidence to bring their monstrous empire crashing down. I contacted the authorities, my voice hoarse with a mixture of fear and righteous fury. I provided them with everything: detailed logs of their special orders, clandestine photos of the hidden kitchen, even recordings of Dubois and Andrews discussing their unspeakable trade. The investigation was swift and brutal. Laurent Dubois, Captain Andrews, and 127 crew members were arrested on federal charges, including murder, conspiracy, and operating a criminal enterprise. The client list, recovered during the investigation, included names that shocked the world, leading to arrests and investigations in a dozen different countries. The cruise line was shut down permanently, its name forever synonymous with depravity. Several government officials resigned in disgrace when their participation in the program was exposed. I no longer work in large-scale food service. The world of haute cuisine, once my passion, now carries the indelible stain of human flesh. I've returned to running a small, quiet restaurant in my hometown, finding solace in honest food and the simple joy of feeding people. Because I learned in the most horrifying way imaginable that the most exclusive dining experiences in the world aren't about rare ingredients or exotic preparations. They're about power. They're about powerful people who have become so utterly disconnected from humanity that they view other human beings as nothing more than menu items. Every time I see a cruise ship advertisement promising dining experiences you'll never forget, a cold dread washes over me. I think about those 43 people who disappeared into that secret kitchen, their lives reduced to a grotesque feast. And I wonder, with a gnawing certainty, how many other ships are out there right now, sailing under the guise of luxury, serving meals that no civilized person should ever have to imagine. The ocean hides many secrets, vast and unfathomable, but some secrets are so dark, so utterly depraved, that they change everything you thought you knew about the nature of evil and how far some people will go in pursuit of the ultimate forbidden experience. The majestic Voyager may have been shut down, but I know that somewhere in the world there are other wealthy individuals still seeking that final taboo, that ultimate transgression. And there are always other ships, other captains, other chefs, willing to provide it for the right price. And the silence of the sea, once a comfort, now echoes with the screams of the consumed. My name is Dr. Eleanor Vasquez, and I'm a 42-year-old emergency physician. For 8 months, I served as the head medical officer aboard the Paradise Dream, a luxury cruise ship that plied the sun-drenched waters of the Mediterranean. I took the position seeking refuge, a respite from the relentless, soul-crushing pace of busy hospital emergency rooms. I envisioned cruise ship medicine as a tranquil escape, a few minor injuries, the occasional bout of seasickness, perhaps a rare, manageable heart attack. I had no idea, no inkling whatsoever, that I was about to stumble into the most disturbing medical mystery of my entire career, a nightmare that would forever alter my understanding of human ethics and the chilling depths of scientific ambition. The Paradise Dream was, by all accounts, a magnificent vessel. One of those newer ships, she was designed not merely as a mode of transport, but as a floating resort, a testament to modern luxury. She carried approximately 4,500 passengers, a vibrant, ever-changing community, and boasted a state-of-the-art medical facility. This wasn't just a glorified first aid station. It included a small, fully equipped emergency room, a surgical suite, and even a morgue, a facility I fervently hoped I would never have cause to use. My medical staff consisted of myself, 2 dedicated nurses, and a part-time physician's assistant who provided invaluable support during peak periods. For the first month, everything unfolded exactly as I had anticipated. I treated the usual array of cruise ship ailments, sunburns, minor cuts from enthusiastic souvenir shopping, a few cases of food poisoning, and helped several elderly passengers manage their chronic conditions. The work was routine, the hours mercifully reasonable, and for the first time in years, I felt like I was practicing medicine without the suffocating pressure and chaotic urgency of a major metropolitan hospital. It was a dream, a true paradise. Then, during my second month aboard the ship, a subtle, deeply unsettling pattern began to emerge. We were on a 12-day cruise, a picturesque journey from the bustling port of Barcelona to the ancient, sun-kissed Greek islands. I started seeing passengers presenting with strikingly similar symptoms: severe, throbbing headaches, disorienting dizziness, profound confusion, and what appeared to be the early, insidious signs of neurological impairment. Initially, I, like any rational physician, attributed these cases to a confluence of factors common on cruise ships: dehydration from too much sun and too little water, excessive alcohol consumption, medication interactions, or simply the inherent stress of travel. But as the days bled into one another, the symptoms in these patients became more severe, more specific, and terrifyingly, more rapid in their onset. They developed what I can only describe as rapid onset dementia-like symptoms. Passengers who had been perfectly lucid, coherent, and engaged when they first came to see me were returning within 24 to 48 hours in states of severe, almost catatonic confusion. They couldn't recognize their own family members, couldn't recall basic information about themselves, their pasts, their very identities. It was as if their minds were unraveling before my eyes. The first case that truly sounded the alarm, that ripped through my professional detachment, was Margaret Sullivan. A 67-year-old retired teacher from Boston, she came to the medical center on day 4 of the cruise, complaining of a debilitating headache. She was traveling with her husband Robert, and both seemed like quintessential cruise passengers, friendly, excited about their vacation, and in reasonably good health for their age. Margaret's vital signs were stable, and her initial neurological exam showed no abnormalities. I treated her headache with standard pain medication and advised her to stay hydrated and avoid excessive alcohol consumption, a common refrain on any cruise. But less than 48 hours later, Robert brought Margaret back to the medical center in a state I had never, in all my years of emergency medicine, witnessed. She couldn't remember her own name. She didn't recognize her husband, the man who had shared decades of his life with her. She seemed to have lost not just days, but decades of memories. When I asked her what year it was, she whispered, 1987. When I asked her where she was, she looked around our sterile medical center with genuine terror, her eyes wide and pleading, and asked if she was in a hospital because she was dying. I immediately ordered comprehensive blood work and arranged for her to be monitored in our small inpatient unit, my mind racing through every possible diagnosis, every obscure neurological condition. But here's where things became truly, chillingly disturbing. When I went to review Margaret's test results the next morning, a cold dread washed over me. All of her medical records, every single byte of data from our computer system, had been meticulously deleted. Not just the recent tests I'd ordered, but her entire patient file, including her initial visit for the headache. It was as if Margaret Sullivan had never been a patient at all, a ghost in the machine. When I confronted our head nurse, Patricia, about the missing records, she looked at me with genuine confusion, her face a blank slate. She insisted she had no memory of treating anyone named Margaret Sullivan. Even more bizarre, when I went to check on Margaret in our inpatient unit, the bed was empty, stripped bare, and according to the ship's passenger manifest, there was no one by that name registered on the cruise. A frantic urgency seized me. I immediately went to find Robert Sullivan, Margaret's husband. But when I located him at the breakfast buffet, he was sitting alone, calmly enjoying his meal, appearing perfectly content. When I approached him, my voice laced with a desperate hope for answers, and asked about his wife, he looked at me blankly, a polite, confused smile on his face. He said he was traveling solo, that he'd never been married. He seemed genuinely bewildered as to why I was asking about a wife he claimed not to have. This experience shook me to my core, rattling the very foundations of my medical training and my perception of reality. I tried to rationalize it, to find a logical explanation. Perhaps I had confused passenger names, a common occurrence on a ship with thousands of transient faces. Or maybe, just maybe, I was experiencing some kind of stress-related memory issues myself, a consequence of my own burnout. But over the following weeks, the same terrifying pattern repeated itself again and again with other passengers. I would treat someone for neurological symptoms. They would return in a state of severe cognitive decline, and then they would simply vanish from all records, from the ship's manifest, as if they had never existed, never breathed, never suffered. The turning point, the moment I shed my last vestiges of doubt and embraced the chilling truth, came during my 4th month on the ship. I decided to secretly document everything. My personal phone, usually reserved for mundane snapshots of sunsets and culinary delights, became a clandestine recording device. I started taking photos of patients, their vacant eyes and trembling hands, a silent testament to their suffering. I kept handwritten notes in a small journal, a desperate chronicle of symptoms and disappearances hidden deep within my cabin. I even began recording some patient interactions, their confused ramblings a haunting symphony of cognitive decay. I was determined to have proof, undeniable evidence that these people existed, that something unspeakable was happening to them. It was during this desperate, solitary investigation that I stumbled upon something that still haunts my waking hours, a scene so grotesque it is seared into my memory. Late one night, I was conducting my rounds in the medical center, the ship's gentle rocking a deceptive lullaby. A faint murmur of voices reached me, emanating from the morgue, a facility that should have been utterly silent, utterly empty, as we hadn't had any deaths on the current cruise. A cold dread, familiar yet intensified, snaked its way around my heart. I quietly approached the morgue door, my footsteps barely audible on the tiled floor, and listened. I could discern at least 3 distinct voices, their tones clinical, detached, discussing processing times and shipment schedules. Using my master key, my hand trembling slightly, I carefully, slowly opened the morgue door and peered inside. What I saw defied everything I thought I knew about the ship's operations, about medicine, about humanity itself. The morgue, a place of solemn finality, had been transformed. It was now a makeshift medical laboratory, gleaming with unfamiliar equipment, its sterile surfaces marred by the chilling reality of human experimentation. Several examining tables stood in the center, and upon them people. People who appeared to be alive, but heavily, unnaturally sedated. Standing around these tables were 3 individuals I recognized, their faces illuminated by the harsh fluorescent lights. Dr. Richards, the ship's consulting neurologist, a man I'd been told only worked part-time, was there. Patricia, the head nurse, her face devoid of the confusion she'd shown me earlier, was meticulously monitoring equipment. And then, Captain Morrison himself, his imposing figure, a chilling presence in this macabre scene. They were all dressed in surgical scrubs, their movements precise, clinical, as they conducted some kind of medical procedures on the sedated patients. As I watched in horrified silence, Dr. Richards, his face a mask of cold concentration, was extracting what appeared to be cerebrospinal fluid from one of the patients, a long needle glinting under the harsh lights. Captain Morrison, clipboard in hand, meticulously took notes, his pen scratching against the paper. Patricia, her expression impassive, adjusted IV drips that snaked into the veins of each patient. And then my gaze fell upon one of the patients, her pale, unconscious face, instantly recognizable despite the pallor. It was Margaret Sullivan, the retired teacher whose mind had been stolen. I was so utterly shocked, so consumed by the sheer horror of the scene, that my phone, still clutched in my trembling hand, slipped from my grasp. The sound, a sharp metallic clatter, echoed through the sterile silence of the makeshift lab, shattering the illusion of my invisibility. All 3 heads snapped towards the door, and I found myself face to face with Captain Morrison, his eyes burning with an anger far more potent than surprise. "Dr. Vasquez," he said, his voice unnervingly calm, a predator's purr. "I think we need to have a conversation." They brought me into the makeshift laboratory, the air thick with the scent of antiseptic and something else, something metallic and unsettling. There, they laid bare the horrifying truth I had stumbled upon. The Paradise Dream, this luxurious floating resort, was nothing more than a clandestine research facility, a mobile laboratory for an illegal medical research program. Their focus, neurological diseases and memory manipulation. The passengers who had developed those mysterious, terrifying symptoms weren't getting sick naturally. They were being deliberately infected with experimental compounds designed to cause rapid, irreversible cognitive decline. Dr. Richards, who was not in fact a consulting neurologist, but a disgraced researcher stripped of his medical license years earlier, explained their twisted rationale. They were conducting human trials for potential treatments for Alzheimer's disease and other forms of dementia. The cruise ship setting, he elaborated with chilling precision, was perfect. Passengers were isolated from their regular doctors, surrounded by unfamiliar faces who might not notice subtle behavioral changes, and part of a controlled environment where medical emergencies could be managed privately, away from prying eyes. Captain Morrison, his voice devoid of remorse, revealed the staggering scope of their operation. It had been running for over 3 years, and they had processed hundreds of passengers during that time. The passengers who by some twisted miracle survived the experimental treatments had their memories altered or erased entirely. A chilling explanation for why people like Robert Sullivan couldn't remember their own spouses. Those who didn't survive, those who succumbed to the brutal experiments, were buried at sea during the darkest hours of the night, their deaths conveniently listed as natural causes. They offered me Timpurcity. He same choice, a horrifying ultimatum that I now realized they had likely extended to other medical staff who had stumbled upon their monstrous secret. Join them, become an accomplice, and receive substantial financial compensation. Or become one of their test subjects, myself. The research, they argued with a chilling conviction, was too important to be stopped by mere ethical concerns. The potential benefits to humanity, they claimed, justified the sacrifices of a few unsuspecting cruise passengers who, in their cold, calculating estimation, wouldn't be missed. I agreed to cooperate, the words catching in my throat, knowing with a terrifying certainty that it was my only chance of survival, and perhaps my only hope of ever stopping what was happening. For the next 2 months I played the part, a terrified actress in a real-life horror show. I pretended to be a willing member of their research team, my hands shaking as I assisted in their vile experiments, my mind screaming in silent protest. All the while I secretly documented everything, every chilling detail, every whispered instruction, desperately searching for a way to contact authorities, to expose the unspeakable evil festering beneath the surface of this luxury liner. I learned that the operation extended far beyond just the Paradise Dream. They had researchers embedded on at least 6 different cruise ships, a terrifying network of floating laboratories. Their funding, I discovered, came from a shadowy pharmaceutical company, desperate to fast-track neurological treatments, regardless of the human cost. When we finally docked in Barcelona at the end of my contract, I had amassed enough evidence to expose the entire horrifying operation. I contacted Interpol, my voice hoarse with a mixture of fear and righteous fury. I provided them with everything: photos, clandestine video recordings, meticulously detailed patient documentation, and a comprehensive breakdown of their abhorrent research protocols. The investigation was a grueling, painstaking process, stretching for nearly 8 months. But finally, the long arm of justice reached out. 23 people involved in the operation were arrested, including Captain Morrison, the disgraced Dr. Richards, and several high-ranking pharmaceutical company executives. The Paradise Dream, once a symbol of luxury, was impounded, its gleaming facade now a grim monument to human depravity. Investigators found irrefutable evidence of medical experiments conducted on over 400 passengers across multiple cruises, a horrifying testament to the scale of their crimes. Many of the victims, I learned, were elderly ravelers, specifically targeted because their disappearances or behavioral changes were less likely to be investigated by authorities, their vulnerability cruelly exploited. I no longer work as a ship's doctor. I've returned to hospital emergency medicine, embracing the stress and chaos, the blood and the tears. Because now I know, with an absolute chilling certainty, that some medical research has no ethical boundaries, and that the isolation of cruise ships, their self-contained worlds adrift on the vast ocean, makes them perfect laboratories for those who wish to experiment on human beings without oversight, without accountability, without a shred of conscience. Sometimes, former colleagues, unaware of the true horrors I witnessed, ask me why I left such a dream job working on luxury cruise ships. And I tell them, my voice tinged with a bitterness they can't comprehend, that some dreams are, in fact, nightmares. The worst part, the part that gnaws at my soul, is knowing that there are probably other ships out there right now, sailing under false pretenses, carrying passengers who believe they are on vacation, but are, in chilling reality, unwitting test subjects in medical experiments that should never, ever be conducted on human beings. Ever. My name is Rebecca, and I'm a 34-year-old accountant from Denver. My life, for the past year, had been a relentless storm of legal battles and emotional wreckage, culminating in a brutal divorce that left me hollowed out and utterly exhausted. My sister, Jennifer, ever the optimist, saw the toll it was taking. "You need to get away from everything, Becca," she'd insisted, her voice a lifeline in my personal tempest. And so she booked us on a 10-day Southern Caribbean cruise aboard the Royal Odyssey, one of those colossal floating cities designed to hold over 5,000 passengers. The idea, Jennifer explained, was that amidst such a vast multitude, I could simply disappear, find a quiet corner, and finally, mercifully, find some peace. The Royal Odyssey was unlike anything I had ever encountered. 15 towering decks, a sprawling labyrinth of restaurants, shimmering pools, grand theatres and bustling shops. It was, quite literally, a city afloat, and I found myself both awestruck and slightly disoriented by the sheer scale of it, easily losing myself in the maze of corridors and elevators. Jennifer and I had adjoining balcony cabins on Deck 12, and from our private sanctuaries, the view was nothing short of breathtaking. An endless expanse of cerulean ocean stretching to the horizon, a boundless canvas of tranquility. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, I felt a genuine, unburdening sense of relief. I could breathe. Those initial days were a balm to my wounded spirit. Jennifer and I spent our mornings lounging by the pool, the sun warm on our skin, the gentle hum of the ship a soothing lullaby. We indulged in the ship's culinary delights, sampling different restaurants each evening, and lost ourselves in the dazzling spectacle of the onboard shows. Slowly, tentatively, I began to remember what it felt like to relax, to exist without the constant gnawing anxiety of looking over my shoulder, or the dread of checking my phone for another venomous message from my ex-husband's lawyer. The ship, with its endless distractions and comforting anonymity, truly felt like a sanctuary, a place where the harsh realities of the outside world simply couldn't reach me. It was on the third day, as the Royal Odyssey gracefully cut through the waves towards the vibrant shores of Barbados, that I first noticed him. The breakfast buffet was a bustling hive of activity, and I was patiently waiting in line for the omelette station, the aroma of sizzling eggs and fresh coffee filling the air. Then, a prickling sensation on the back of my neck. I felt it before I saw it. Someone staring. I turned slowly, and there he was. A man, probably in his mid-50s, standing about 10 feet away, a plate piled high with food in his hands. He wasn't particularly tall, nor did he possess an imposing physique, but there was an unsettling intensity in his gaze, a predatory glint that made my stomach clench. Our eyes met, and a slow smile spread across his face. It wasn't a friendly smile. It was something colder, something that felt like a trap. I quickly averted my gaze, my heart beginning to thump an erratic rhythm against my ribs, and focused intently on ordering my breakfast, willing him to disappear. Later that morning, as Jennifer and I navigated the crowded pool deck, searching for a pair of empty loungers, I saw him again. He was seated alone at a table near the bustling pool bar, a drink in his hand, and there was no mistaking it. He was definitely watching me. This time, when he caught my eye, he raised his glass in a slow, deliberate gesture that felt less like a friendly toast and more like a silent, chilling acknowledgement. Jennifer, sensing my sudden tension, asked what was wrong, her brow furrowed with concern. But I brushed it off, unwilling to cast a shadow over her much-needed vacation with my burgeoning paranoia. I told myself I was being oversensitive, a lingering side effect of the emotional gauntlet I'd endured. Yet throughout the rest of that day, an unsettling pattern began to emerge. Everywhere we went, he seemed to be there. At the afternoon trivia contest, he sat 3 tables away, not participating, but his eyes, I could feel them, were fixed on me. During the evening show, I spotted him in the balcony section, a lone figure amidst 1,000 faces. And even though the theatre was packed, I could feel the weight of his gaze throughout the entire performance, a phantom touch on my skin. When Jennifer and I decided to catch the late-night comedy show, there he was again, perched alone at the bar, a silent, watchful sentinel. I desperately tried to rationalize it, to convince myself it was merely a coincidence on a ship teeming with thousands of passengers. It made sense, I argued with myself, that you'd see the same faces repeatedly, especially if your routines aligned. But there was something about the deliberate way he positioned himself, always with an unobstructed view of wherever I happened to be, that sent a cold shiver crawling down my spine. On the fourth day, as the ship docked in the lush emerald embrace of St. Lucia, I made a decision. I booked a solo excursion, a rainforest hike to a hidden waterfall, while Jennifer opted for a different tour with some new friends she'd made. I craved a reprieve, a few hours away from the suffocating sensation of being watched. Our group for the hike consisted of about 20 people, a mix of excited tourists and seasoned adventurers. Halfway through the trek, during a brief water break, a horrifying sight unfolded before me. He emerged from behind a cluster of trees, as if conjured from the very jungle itself. He wasn't part of our tour group. I was absolutely certain of that. I had meticulously scanned every face at our meeting point, committing them to memory. Yet there he was, acting as if he belonged, engaging in casual conversation with other hikers about the breathtaking scenery. When he saw me staring, a wide, unsettling smile stretched across his face, and he waved enthusiastically, as if we were old friends, long overdue for a reunion. I approached our tour guide, my voice a hushed whisper, and quietly asked if we had picked up any additional people along the way. She looked at me, genuinely confused, and shook her head. "No," she replied. "Our group has been the same 20 people since we left the ship." When I pointed him out, her brow furrowed, and she admitted she had never seen him before, confirming he was definitely not part of any scheduled tour that day. She seemed as utterly bewildered as I was, unable to comprehend how someone could simply materialize in the middle of a guided rainforest hike. For the remainder of the excursion, I clung to the tour guide like a shadow, but I could still feel his presence, a constant pressure at the edge of my vision, always maintaining the same unnerving distance, always watching. When we finally returned to the ship, I saw him disembarking through the main gangway, as if he had every right to be there. As if he hadn't just materialized out of thin air. That evening I decided I couldn't endure the silent torment any longer. I had to confront it. I went to guest services, my voice trembling slightly as I explained that I felt like I was being followed by another passenger. Carol, the guest services manager, a woman whose professional demeanor exuded calm and competence, listened patiently, her pen poised as she meticulously took down every detail. She asked if I knew the man's name or cabin number, and a wave of frustration washed over me as I realized I had absolutely no information about him beyond his unsettling appearance. Carol assured me they would investigate and urged me to report any further incidents immediately. As I turned to leave the guest services desk, a light tap on my shoulder sent a jolt of ice through my veins. I spun around, and there he was, standing so close I could inhale the heavy, cloying scent of his cologne, a fragrance that made my stomach churn. He wore that same unsettling smile, and when he spoke, his voice was soft, almost friendly, a deceptive calm that somehow made everything infinitely worse. "Rebecca," he murmured, and hearing my name, spoken so intimately by this stranger, made my blood run cold. "I couldn't help but notice you seemed upset when you were talking to the nice lady at the desk. I hope everything is all right." My mind raced. I hadn't told anyone my name during the excursion, and I certainly hadn't introduced myself to him. I had been wearing my cruise ship ID card, but it was tucked securely inside my bag most of the time. "How do you know my name?" I managed to ask, my voice barely a whisper. His smile widened, a chilling, knowing expression. "Oh, I make it my business to know the names of interesting people," he replied, his gaze unwavering. "You're in cabin 12A, aren't you? I'm just down the hall in 12B. Funny how we keep running into each other." The casualness with which he uttered my cabin number, the intimate knowledge of my whereabouts, sent a fresh wave of terror through me. How did he know where I was staying? Had he been watching me go in and out of my room, meticulously tracking my movements? I couldn't respond. My throat had tightened and my legs felt like lead. I quickly turned and walked away, heading straight for the nearest elevator, desperate to escape his unnerving presence. But as the doors hissed shut, I saw him through the closing gap, still standing there in the guest services area, still smiling, still watching. That night, I called Jennifer into my room, my voice shaking as I recounted every terrifying detail. She was as disturbed as I was, her usual cheerful demeanor replaced by a grim resolve. She insisted we go back to guest services together to file a more detailed, more insistent complaint. The next morning, Carol from guest services called my cabin, her voice grave, requesting to meet with me privately. When I arrived at her office, her serious expression immediately put me on edge. She explained that they had meticulously reviewed the passenger manifest and all available security footage, and there was something profoundly strange about the situation. According to their records, cabin 12B, the cabin the man had claimed to be staying in, was listed as occupied by a couple named James and Helen Morrison from Ontario, Canada. There was no single male passenger registered to that cabin. Even more disturbing, when security went to check cabin 12B, they found the Morrisons exactly where they were supposed to be. A sweet, elderly couple in their 70s who had been on the ship since embarkation and had never heard of anyone matching the description I'd given. They had no idea who might have claimed to be staying in their cabin. Carol then showed me the security footage from various parts of the ship, and while they could clearly see me in several locations I'd mentioned, the man I described was nowhere to be found in any of the recordings. It was as if he was invisible to the cameras, a phantom presence perfectly visible only to me. The footage from the guest services area, the one place I knew he had been standing right beside me, showed me talking animatedly to empty air, a chilling testament to the impossibility of it all. I distinctly remembered him standing there speaking my name, his cologne assaulting my senses. That afternoon, as we sailed towards our next pios, Bert, I sat on my balcony, the gentle sea breeze doing little to calm the storm raging within me. The idea that I might be hallucinating, that I was having some kind of mental breakdown, terrified me almost as much as the thought of being stalked by a flesh-and-blood predator. But then, a voice. It drifted from the balcony next door, cabin 12B. "Beautiful view, isn't it, Rebecca?" It was his voice, unmistakable, chillingly close, emanating from the balcony that was supposed to belong to the elderly Canadian couple. I crept to the edge of my balcony, my heart hammering against my ribs, and peered around the divider, but I couldn't see anyone. The voice continued, closer now, as if he was standing right at the flimsy divider between our balconies. "I've been enjoying our time together so much. It's nice to finally have someone who appreciates the same things I do." I heard a soft scrape, like a chair being moved, as if someone was settling in for a long, intimate conversation. "We have 6 more days together, Rebecca. I'm looking forward to getting to know you better." I scrambled back into my cabin, my breath catching in my throat, and immediately called Jennifer, who arrived within minutes, her face etched with concern. But when we cautiously ventured back out to the balcony, everything was silent. The balcony next door appeared empty, and when we called out, there was no response. Jennifer, ever practical, suggested we go check on the Morrisons. So, we walked down the hall and knocked on cabin 12B. Helen Morrison answered the door, a sweet, elderly woman, exactly as Carol had described, her eyes wide with genuine confusion at our unexpected visit. When we asked if anyone else had access to their balcony, she assured us that she and her husband had been in their cabin all afternoon and hadn't heard any voices or seen anyone. Her husband, James, appeared behind her, and both seemed genuinely concerned about my well-being, their kindness a stark contrast to the terror I was experiencing. For the remaining 6 days of the cruise, I never saw the man again. There were no more unsettling sightings in restaurants or theaters, no more phantom appearances during excursions, no more chilling voices from the balcony next door. It was as if he had simply vanished, a silent, unsettling disappearance that should have brought immense relief. But somehow, his absence felt almost more ominous than his presence had been. On the final night of the cruise, as I meticulously packed my belongings, a small folded piece of paper caught my eye. It was tucked beneath my pillow, a ship's daily newsletter, but it wasn't from our cruise. The date on the newsletter was from 3 months earlier, and it was from a different ship entirely. The Ocean Princess. Someone had circled an article, a small, chilling detail about a passenger who had gone missing during that cruise. a man in his mid-50s who had simply vanished from his cabin one night. The missing passenger's name was David Chen, and his cabin number was listed as 12B. The photo accompanying the article showed a face I recognized immediately. It was him. The man who had been following me, the man who had claimed to be staying in cabin 12B on our ship. But according to the article, David Chen had disappeared at sea 3 months ago and was presumed dead. I never reported finding the newsletter. I knew how utterly insane it would sound, how quickly I would be dismissed as delusional. Instead, I kept it, a grim trophy of my terrifying encounter. And I've spent countless hours since then, consumed by a desperate need for answers, researching David Chen and the Ocean Princess incident. What I discovered has kept me awake at night for months, a cold, creeping dread that refuses to dissipate. David Chen hadn't just disappeared. He had been following and harassing a female passenger before his disappearance, a woman who had complained to security about being stalked by a man in cabin 12B. I don't take cruises anymore, and I probably never will again, because somewhere out there on ships sailing across the world's vast, indifferent oceans, I believe David Chen is still there, a spectral presence in cabin 12B, still following women who, like me, just want to disappear into the crowd and find some peace. And the most terrifying part of all is that no security camera will ever catch him. No passenger manifest will ever list his name, and no one, absolutely no one, will ever believe the women who try to report him. Sometimes, late at night, I still smell that heavy, cloying cologne, a phantom scent that clings to my memory. And I wonder if the ocean ever truly gives up its dead, or if some of them, like David Chen, simply find new, horrifying ways to hunt. My name is Sarah, and for the past 5 years, my life has been a perpetual motion of ocean waves and new horizons. As a travel blogger, I've traversed the globe, experiencing every facet of the cruise industry, from the opulent grandeur of luxury suites to the cozy confines of budget interior cabins, from the pulsating energy of Caribbean party ships to the serene elegance of European river cruises. I thought I'd seen it all. I believed I was an expert, a seasoned voyager immune to the industry's surprises. But last October, during a seemingly innocuous 7-day Mediterranean cruise aboard the Oceanic Splendor, everything I thought I knew about life at sea, about safety, about reality itself, shattered into 1,000 chilling pieces. I had booked this particular cruise with a specific purpose, to gather material for an article on solo female travel. The Oceanic Splendor was heavily marketed as a bastion of safety for women venturing alone, a colossal vessel capable of accommodating over 4,000 passengers. The logic was simple. With so many people around, I reasoned, I could never truly be alone, never truly vulnerable. I meticulously selected my cabin, requesting a midship interior room on deck 8. It was a strategic choice, close enough to the main areas to feel secure, yet sufficiently removed from the boisterous pool deck to ensure undisturbed sleep. My arrival at the Miami port for embarkation was, as always, a symphony of controlled chaos. Thousands of eager travelers, a vibrant tapestry of anticipation and excitement, jostled their way towards the gangplank. Families, their faces alight with vacation dreams, posed for photos against the backdrop of the colossal ship, a floating monument to leisure. This routine was so ingrained in me, so familiar, I could practically navigate it in my sleep. The efficient security screening, the seamless check-in, the satisfying click of my keycard being issued. It was all wonderfully, reassuringly familiar. And the ship itself? A marvel. The Oceanic Splendor was one of those newer vessels, a testament to modern maritime engineering and design. Glass elevators glided silently through multi-story atriums, bathed in the soft glow of LED lights, creating an illusion of a luxurious resort rather than a mere boat. My assigned cabin, 82247, promised a week of quiet solitude. When I finally located it, I was genuinely surprised. It was slightly more spacious than I'd anticipated for an interior room, boasting a small sitting area and what appeared to be a recently renovated bathroom. Miguel, the cabin steward, greeted me with a warm smile, explaining that I'd received a complimentary upgrade due to some last-minute booking adjustments. I didn't question it. Free upgrades, while rare, were a welcome perk in the cruise world, and I was simply grateful for the unexpected extra space. The first 3 days of the cruise unfolded like a dream. We explored the sun-drenched streets of Barcelona, savored the chic elegance of Nice. I immersed myself in excellent cooking classes, my senses alive with new flavors and aromas. I even forged a delightful connection with a charming couple from Ohio, celebrating their 30th anniversary, their laughter echoing through the ship's vibrant lounges. Each evening, around 10 o'clock, I'd retreat to the sanctuary of my cabin, indulge in a refreshing shower, and then settle down to work on my blog posts, the gentle, rhythmic rocking of the ship lulling me into a peaceful slumber. The oceanic splendor, it seemed, was living up to its sterling reputation as a meticulously run vessel, a haven of tranquility and enjoyment. But then came the fourth night. As we sailed towards our next port of call, the ancient city of Rome, an insidious unease began to creep in, a subtle discord in the otherwise harmonious rhythm of the voyage. I'd returned to my cabin earlier than usual, around 8:30 p.m., a mild headache prompting an early retreat before dinner. As I slid my keycard into the lock, a sound, faint yet distinct, pierced the quiet of the corridor. Voices. They were coming from inside my cabin. Not the artificial chatter of the television. I always made sure to switch that off before leaving, but actual human voices, hushed, conspiratorial. I froze, my hand still on the door handle, a wave of confusion washing over me. Had I somehow misidentified my cabin? Was this not 8247? But no, there it was, my luggage tag, still dangling from the door handle, a silent confirmation. This was unequivocally my room. My ear pressed against the cool metal of the door. I strained to discern the words, but they remained an unintelligible murmur. I could, however, make out at least 2 distinct male voices, speaking in what sounded like a foreign language, one I couldn't place. A cold dread began to coil in my stomach, my heart quickening its pace. Had someone broken into my room? Were they pilfering my belongings, violating my personal space? My first instinct was to confront them, but a more cautious thought prevailed. I decided to call security from the house phone down the hall, a safer approach than walking directly into an unknown situation. But as I turned to walk away, the voices abruptly ceased. A sudden, unsettling silence descended, followed by the unmistakable sound of footsteps approaching the door from the inside. Panic, sharp and immediate, seized me. I quickly pivoted, walking briskly towards the elevator bank, feigning an air of casual waiting, all the while keeping a vigilant eye on my cabin door. After what felt like an eternity, but was likely only 5 minutes, the door to 8247 opened. 2 men, clad in the ship's crew uniform, emerged. They carried what appeared to be maintenance equipment, their faces impassive as they walked briskly towards the crew-only areas of the ship. Confused, yet undeniably relieved, I returned to my cabin. Everything appeared to be exactly as I had left it. My laptop sat undisturbed on the desk, its screen dark. My jewelry, a small collection of everyday pieces, remained in its organizer on the bathroom counter. My clothes hung neatly in the closet. Nothing seemed to be missing, nothing disturbed. A wave of self-reproach washed over me. Had I overreacted? Was it simply a routine maintenance check, as guest services would later suggest? I called the guest services desk, my voice still tinged with a lingering unease, and reported the incident. They assured me that routine maintenance was indeed scheduled for various cabins that week, though they expressed a surprising degree of bewilderment that I hadn't been notified in advance. The next morning I recounted the strange encounter to Miguel, my cabin steward, when he arrived to clean my room. His reaction was peculiar, a genuine confusion clouding his usually cheerful demeanor. He insisted with an almost defensive tone that no maintenance had been scheduled for my cabin. He even pulled out his electronic tablet, a device that listed every service request for every cabin in his section, and pointed to the screen. Cabin 8247, he confirmed, was not on the list. When I described the two men I'd seen, Miguel's expression shifted, a flicker of concern replacing his confusion. He stated unequivocally that he had never seen anyone matching those descriptions working in either the housekeeping or maintenance departments. A cold knot began to form in my stomach. That evening, a profound reluctance to return to my cabin settled over me. I decided to prolong my time in the ship's main areas, determined not to set foot back in 8247 until sheer exhaustion forced me. I spent hours in the vibrant, clinking world of the casino, caught a late-night show that barely held my attention, and even grabbed a midnight snack from the buffet, anything to delay the inevitable. It wasn't until nearly 1 a.m. that I finally made my way back to Deck 8. The corridors, usually bustling with late-night revelers, were now dimly lit by emergency lighting, casting long, dancing shadows. Most passengers were either deep in slumber or still lost in the throes of celebration in the upper deck lounges. As I approached my cabin, a sight, subtle yet profoundly chilling, made my blood run cold. The door to 8247 was slightly ajar, maybe an inch or two, a mere sliver of an opening, but undeniably not fully closed. A jolt of icy certainty shot through me. I had absolutely locked it when I left that morning. I always did. My expensive camera equipment, my livelihood was inside, and I was meticulous about security. I stood in the hallway for several minutes, my breath held, straining to catch any sound from within, but there was only the oppressive silence of the ship's interior. Using the flashlight on my phone, I cautiously pushed the door open and stepped inside. The cabin was dark, but something felt fundamentally, terrifyingly different about the space. It took me a moment to pinpoint it. The smell. A musty, stale odor permeated the air, like the scent of forgotten clothes or a room that had been sealed off for months, left to decay. But that was impossible on a cruise ship, where the air conditioning hummed constantly, circulating fresh, sanitized air. I flicked on the lights, and the scene before me confirmed my worst fears. Someone had definitely been in my room. My suitcase, which I always kept meticulously zipped and positioned parallel to the wall, was now at a slight, unsettling angle. The bathroom door, which I habitually left open, was now closed. But the most disturbing detail, the one that sent a shiver of pure dread down my spine, was the sitting area. The chairs had been rearranged. They now faced each other, rather than the television, as if two people had been engaged in a hushed, intimate conversation within the confines of my private space. This time, I didn't call guest services. I was too terrified to remain in the room alone, even for a moment. I snatched my essential items, my passport, my wallet, my phone, and fled, heading directly for the 24-hour guest services desk on Deck 4. Patricia, the night manager, listened to my frantic, disjointed account with a growing expression of concern. She immediately dispatched 2 security officers to thoroughly inspect my cabin. They found no signs of forced entry, no hidden intruders, but they did confirm my observations. The furniture had indeed been moved, and there was an unusual, unidentifiable smell lingering in the air. Patricia, her brow furrowed with worry, offered to move me to a different cabin immediately. But this is where the story takes an even more disturbing, almost surreal turn. As Patricia pulled up my reservation on her computer system, her frown deepened. She looked up at me, her eyes wide with bewilderment, and asked me to repeat my cabin number. 8247, I said, my voice trembling slightly. She shook her head, a slow, disbelieving movement. According to our records, she explained, her voice hushed, Cabin 8247 was taken out of service 3 months ago due to what we've termed ongoing issues. It's not supposed to have any guests assigned to it. She turned the computer screen towards me, and there it was, stark and undeniable. Cabin 8247, marked in angry red letters as unavailable, do not book. Yet somehow, I had been living there for 4 days. Even more perplexing, when she finally located my actual reservation, it showed that I was supposed to be in cabin 8251, just 4 doors down from the room I'd been occupying. We walked back to Deck 8 together, the silence between us heavy with unspoken questions. And that's when I noticed something that still sends a shiver down my spine even now. The nameplate beside the door of cabin 8247 wasn't the standard cruise ship door marker. Instead of the usual pristine white plastic with crisp black numbering, this door bore an old, tarnished brass plate, its surface dulled by time, looking as if it belonged on a much older, perhaps even forgotten vessel. The numbers, etched rather than printed, were barely discernible beneath a greenish patina, a testament to decades of salt air exposure. Patricia was as utterly bewildered as I was. She radioed for the maintenance chief, who arrived within 10 minutes, his face a mask of efficiency that quickly dissolved into a pale, shocked expression when he saw the door. He explained, his voice tight with a mixture of disbelief and apprehension, that cabin 8247 had been sealed off after a passenger had died there under highly unusual circumstances during the ship's previous sailing. The room, he emphasized, was supposed to be completely inaccessible, its electronic locks disabled, the door explicitly marked as out of service. Yet inexplicably, my key card had been programmed to open that very room. I had been living in a cabin that, officially, didn't even exist for guests. The maintenance chief, a man who clearly prided himself on his ship's operational integrity, couldn't offer a single explanation for how I'd gained access, or who had been reprogramming my keycard each day when I'd innocently sought assistance from guest services for various minor issues throughout the cruise. They moved me to my originally assigned cabin, 8251, immediately. But as we transferred my belongings, a persistent, unsettling feeling clung to me, the sensation of being watched. Every time I glanced back at cabin 8247, I half expected to see those two mysterious men in crew uniforms standing there, their faces impassive, their intentions unknown. But the hallway remained empty, a silent testament to the unsettling mystery. The remainder of the cruise passed without further incident, yet I never felt completely safe. Every night, I would lie awake in my new cabin, listening, straining to hear any sounds from 8247, just 4 doors away. Sometimes in the dead of night, I swear I could hear muffled voices emanating from that direction, a chilling echo of the first time, even though Patricia had assured me the room was now properly sealed, truly inaccessible. When I finally disembarked in Miami, I tried, desperately, to glean more information about what had transpired in cabin 8247, but the cruise line remained tight-lipped, refusing to provide any details beyond a terse confirmation that a passenger incident had necessitated the room's permanent closure. Since then, I've delved into the shadowy corners of cruise ship employee forums, a clandestine world of shared experiences and whispered warnings. There, I discovered that cabin 8247 is infamous among the crew, a room with a chilling reputation for strange occurrences, unexplained sounds, and the pervasive, unsettling feeling of being watched. I still travel, and yes, I still take cruises, but my routine has changed. I meticulously double-check my cabin assignment now every single time, and I always verify that my room is officially available for guests, because somewhere out there, on the vast, indifferent expanse of the ocean, the oceanic splendor sails on, and cabin 8247 remains marked as unavailable. But I harbor a terrible gnawing feeling that unsuspecting guests are still, somehow, ending up there, just as I did. And the questions, like phantom voices in the night, continue to haunt me. Who were those men I saw leaving my cabin? And what unspeakable acts were they performing in a room that was supposed to be empty, a room that held a secret too dark for the light of day? My name is Marcus, and for 6 years, the rhythmic thrum of ship engines has been the soundtrack to my life. As a 28-year-old marine engineer, I've navigated the intricate guts of every vessel imaginable, the colossal, oil-slicked tankers, the towering cargo ships laden with the world's goods, even the sleek, opulent luxury yachts of the super-rich. I thought I'd seen every facet of the maritime industry, from its grimy underbelly to its polished facade. So, when the offer came to take a temporary position on the Caribbean Majesty as a backup engineer for their 14-day transatlantic crossing, I didn't hesitate. The pay was exceptional, a significant bump from my usual rates, and the prospect of working on a cruise ship, a vessel designed for leisure rather than brute force, felt like a welcome change of pace from the relentless grind of industrial shipping. I envisioned a relaxed journey, perhaps even a chance to enjoy some of the amenities the passengers took for granted. The Caribbean Majesty, an older ship built in the late 1990s, had recently undergone a lavish renovation, transforming her into a floating palace capable of accommodating over 3,200 passengers. My role was to fill in for their regular third engineer, who had, rather conveniently, fallen ill just days before departure. The chief engineer, a gruff, no-nonsense Norwegian man named Eriksson, gave me a perfunctory orientation, his thick accent a constant rumble. He assigned me to the night shift, from 11 o'clock p.m. to 7 o'clock a.m., my duties revolving around the ceaseless monitoring of the engine room and the myriad mechanical systems that kept this behemoth alive. For the first week, everything was routine, almost mind-numbingly so. The Caribbean Majesty was a well-maintained vessel, a testament to the diligent work of her crew. The engineering team was professional, experienced, and efficient. My nights were spent checking gauges, poring over computer systems, and conducting periodic walkthroughs of the lower decks, ensuring every cog in the ship's intricate machinery turned smoothly. The night shift was a realm of quiet solitude, most passengers lost in their dreams, only essential crew members moving through the hushed corridors. It was during my second week, on the 9th night of the crossing, that the routine shattered, and I stumbled upon something that would forever alter my perception of the ocean and the darkness it could conceal. I was conducting my regular 3 o'clock a.m. walkthrough of Deck 2, a sprawling utilitarian area that housed most of the ship's mechanical systems and the cramped crew quarters. This entire deck was strictly off-limits to passengers, requiring special keycard access to enter, a clear demarcation between the gilded world above and the working heart of the ship below. As I meticulously checked the water purification systems, a faint murmur of voices reached my ears. They were coming from a section of the ship I'd never had cause to visit before, a dimly lit corridor that, according to the ship's blueprints, led to what I believed were unused storage rooms. The voices were hushed, almost conspiratorial, and I could make out at least 3 different people engaged in what sounded like an urgent, clandestine conversation. What struck me as profoundly odd was the location itself. This particular corridor was a forgotten artery of the ship, a place where no legitimate business should be conducted at this hour, or perhaps at any hour. My curiosity, a trait that had often served me well in diagnosing complex mechanical issues, now pulled me forward, a silent, unseen observer, drawn to the unsettling whispers in the dark. The air grew heavy with a metallic tang, a scent I couldn't quite place, but one that stirred a primal unease within me. I moved closer, my footsteps muffled by the industrial carpeting, my heart beginning to pound a slow, insistent rhythm against my ribs. The voices grew clearer, fragments of sentences drifting through the stale air. Words like cargo, delivery, and transfer punctuated the hushed tones, words that felt utterly out of place in the context of a luxury cruise liner. A cold dread began to seep into my bones, a premonition of something deeply wrong. I reached the end of the corridor, a heavy, unmarked steel door looming before me. A faint sliver of light escaped from beneath it, and the voices, now louder, more distinct, emanated from within. I pressed my ear against the cold metal, straining to understand. What I heard sent a jolt of pure horror through me, a sickening realization that twisted my gut. It wasn't just a conversation, it was a transaction. And the cargo they spoke of, it wasn't inanimate, it was human. The muffled cries, the desperate pleas, the chillingly detached voices of those in control, it painted a picture of unimaginable cruelty. I stumbled back, my mind reeling. The sterile confines of the ship suddenly transformed into a suffocating cage. This wasn't a luxury cruise, It was a vessel of unspeakable evil. For the next few nights, I couldn't shake the image of that door, the sounds that had escaped from behind it. I pretended to continue my routine, but my senses were heightened, every shadow a potential threat, every hushed conversation a possible clue. I started making detours, lingering near that restricted area, trying to piece together the puzzle. I saw the same two men, always in the dead of night, always near that door, their faces grim, their movements furtive. I even caught a glimpse of Erickson, the chief engineer, my supposed mentor, exchanging hushed words with them, a cold, calculating look in his eyes that I hadn't noticed before. The realization hit me like a physical blow. Erickson was involved. The man I trusted, the man who had assigned me to this very shift, was at the heart of this monstrous operation. On the 12th night, a desperate resolve solidified within me. I made a decision that, in hindsight, probably saved my life, but simultaneously plunged me into an even deeper abyss of danger. I decided to document what was happening. My phone's camera, a small, unassuming device, became my weapon. I waited until 4 a.m., the hour when the corridors were usually deserted, a ghostly silence hanging in the air. My heart pounded a frantic drum against my ribs as I made my way back to that restricted area, every shadow seeming to lengthen, every creak of the ship a harbinger of discovery. But this time, they were waiting for me. As soon as I rounded the corner, blinding flashlights erupted, searing my vision. I was surrounded. 6 crew members, their faces grim, their eyes hard, materialized from the darkness. And there, at the center of their menacing circle, was Erickson, the chief engineer, his thick accent cutting through the tense silence. "We've been wondering when you'd show up again, Marcus," he said, a chilling lack of surprise in his voice. You've been asking too many questions, showing up in places you don't belong. That's not very smart for someone in your position." They searched me, their hands rough and impersonal, confiscating my phone. But they didn't find the small digital camera, a relic from my photography hobby, that I'd meticulously hidden in my tool belt, a tiny, almost invisible beacon of hope. One of the crew members, a woman from housekeeping whose eyes held a disturbing glint, suggested they simply add me to the cargo. The words hung in the air, a chilling testament to their casual cruelty. But Erickson shook his head, a pragmatic calculation in his eyes. He explained, in a tone devoid of emotion, that my disappearance would be too suspicious. The marine engineering company, my employers, would be expecting detailed reports about my temporary assignment. My absence would raise too many questions they couldn't afford. Instead, they offered me a choice that wasn't really a choice at all. I could either join their operation, become an unwilling accomplice, and receive a substantial cut of the illicit profits, or I could have an accident during one of my night shifts. Industrial accidents on ships, Erickson explained with a chillingly casual shrug, were common. My body, he added, would never be found if I went overboard in the middle of the vast, indifferent Atlantic. I agreed to cooperate, the words a bitter taste in my mouth, knowing it was my only chance to survive, and perhaps to somehow stop the monstrous enterprise I had uncovered. For the remaining 2 days of the voyage, I played my part, a terrified actor in a macabre play. I pretended to be one of them, a willing participant in their vile trade, all the while secretly documenting everything I could with the hidden camera. I learned the horrifying scope of their operation. It had been running for over 2 years, and the Caribbean Majesty was just one of several ships in their fleet, all being used to transport people who had been kidnapped, or worse, sold into slavery. When we finally reached port in Southampton, the air thick with the promise of land, I was escorted off the ship by 2 of the crew members, their presence a constant suffocating reminder of my forced complicity. They made it explicitly clear that they would be watching me. They had my home address, my family's contact information, and even photos of me entering and leaving my apartment building. If I contacted authorities, they warned, I would disappear permanently, and my family would be at grave risk. For 3 months after returning home, I lived in a cage of constant fear. Sleep was a distant memory, food held no appeal, and every unexpected sound sent a jolt of adrenaline through my system. But beneath the terror, a burning conviction began to grow. I couldn't live with the knowledge of what I'd witnessed, the silent screams of those trapped below deck, without doing something. Anything. I eventually contacted an FBI task force specializing in international trafficking, my voice a strained whisper as I recounted my horrifying tale. I provided them with every shred of evidence I'd meticulously gathered, the tiny digital camera, a silent witness to the atrocities. The investigation was a grueling, painstaking process stretching for nearly a year. But finally, justice, slow and arduous, began to turn its wheels. 17 crew members were arrested, and the trafficking operation, a vile stain on the maritime world, was finally shut down. The Caribbean Majesty, once a vessel of terror, was impounded, and the cruise line itself faced federal charges, its reputation irrevocably tarnished. More importantly, far more importantly, they rescued 43 people who had been held captive on various ships within the trafficking network, their freedom a beacon of hope in the darkness. I still work as a marine engineer, the hum of engines still a familiar comfort, but I won't. I'll never, ever set foot on another cruise ship. The industry's subsequent investigation revealed a horrifying truth. Trafficking operations had been exploiting cruise ships for years, taking advantage of the complex jurisdictional issues that arise when vessels traverse international waters, making law enforcement a bureaucratic nightmare. Sometimes in the dead of night, I still wake up, the muffled voices I heard coming from that modified storage room echoing in my ears. And I wonder, with a chilling certainty, how many other ships are out there right now, silently carrying human cargo, lives that will never appear on any passenger manifest. The ocean is vast, an indifferent expanse, and once you're out there, you are utterly, completely at the mercy of whoever controls the ship you're on. I testified in federal court against the crew members, my voice steady, despite the tremor in my hands. But I still look over my shoulder every single day. Because human trafficking is a multi-billion-dollar industry, a shadowy empire built on suffering, and the people who run it do not, will not, forgive those who interfere with their operations. Every cruise ship that glides past my apartment window, a gleaming symbol of leisure, serves as a stark, haunting reminder that somewhere out there, people are still trapped below deck, their voices unheard, waiting for someone, anyone, to come to their rescue. And the silence of the ocean, once a comfort, now carries the weight of their unspoken pleas. My life has always been framed by a lens. As a professional photographer, I've chased light and shadow across continents, capturing moments of raw beauty, stark reality, and profound human emotion. My camera was not just a tool, it was an extension of my eye, my way of understanding and interpreting the world. So, when I was commissioned to document the maiden voyage of the Northern Star, a state-of-the-art luxury cruise ship designed for Arctic expeditions, I saw it as an unparalleled opportunity. I envisioned breathtaking landscapes of ice and snow, the majestic dance of the aurora borealis, and the serene grandeur of polar wildlife. I was prepared for cold, for isolation, for the stark beauty of the untamed north. I was not prepared for the horror that lay beneath the ship's gleaming facade. The Northern Star was a technological marvel, a vessel built for extreme conditions, yet offering unparalleled comfort. Her panoramic lounges provided sweeping views of the icy wilderness, and her decks were equipped with specialized viewing platforms for wildlife observation. Captain Larson, a man with a weathered face and eyes that seemed to hold the wisdom of 1,000 voyages, exuded an aura of quiet competence. My initial days were filled with the expected. Stunning photographs of glaciers, the occasional glimpse of seals basking on ice floes, and the ethereal glow of the northern lights painting the sky. The passengers, a mix of adventurous tourists and seasoned naturalists, were equally captivated by the pristine environment. It was during a particularly long stretch of open water, far from any landmass, that I began to notice a disturbing anomaly. The ship's schedule, meticulously planned and advertised, included dedicated periods for wildlife observation and environmental research. Yet during these times, I observed unusual activity on the lower decks, particularly near a large, rarely used cargo bay. Crew members, their faces grim and uncommunicative, would move with a furtive urgency, often under the cover of darkness or during periods of heavy fog. I dismissed it initially as routine maintenance, perhaps the loading of supplies at sea, though it seemed an odd practice for a luxury liner. But the sounds were what truly began to gnaw at me. A low, guttural thrumming, followed by a sickening thud, and then a strange, almost mournful cry that seemed to echo through the ship's hull. It was a sound that resonated deep within my bones, a sound that spoke of pain and desperation. My photographer's instinct, always drawn to the hidden narrative, compelled me to investigate. One night, feigning a late-night photo shoot of the stars, I made my way to the lower decks, my camera bag slung over my shoulder, its contents a silent witness. The air grew heavy with a metallic, briny scent, a smell that was unmistakably blood. I found a small unsecured access panel near the cargo bay, a sliver of light escaping from within. Peering through the crack, my heart seized in my chest. The cargo bay, far from being empty, was a scene of unspeakable butchery. Massive, glistening carcasses, unmistakably whales, lay dismembered on the blood-slicked floor. Crew members, their faces splattered with gore, worked with brutal efficiency, carving and processing the enormous marine mammals. This wasn't environmental research. This was illegal whaling on a horrifying scale. And then I saw him. Captain Larson, his weathered face now a mask of cold ruthlessness, overseeing the gruesome operation, his eyes devoid of the wisdom I had once perceived. He was not just aware. He was the orchestrator of this bloody harvest. I stumbled back, my hand instinctively reaching for my camera. The click of the shutter, though muffled, was enough. A crew member, his eyes wide with surprise, turned towards me. I was caught. They dragged me into the cargo bay, the stench of blood and death overwhelming my senses. Captain Larson, his voice a low growl, explained their operation. The Northern Star, this symbol of pristine Arctic exploration, was a front for a highly lucrative, illegal whaling enterprise. The luxury cruises were merely a cover, allowing them to operate in remote international waters, far from the prying eyes of environmental activists and law enforcement. My photographs, they revealed, were a dangerous liability. They offered me a choice, a chilling ultimatum delivered amidst the carnage. I could join them, become their official documentarian, capturing the beauty of their harvest, and receive a substantial share of the profits. Or I could become another casualty of the unforgiving Arctic, lost to the icy depths. My disappearance attributed to the harsh realities of polar exploration. The message was clear: cooperate, or become another one of the ocean's silent victims. I agreed, my stomach churning, my mind racing, knowing that my survival, and perhaps the chance to expose them, depended on my unwilling complicity. For the remainder of the voyage, I played my part, my camera now a tool of forced deception. I took photographs, my lens capturing the grotesque reality of their operation, every click a silent scream of protest. I learned the intricate details of their network, the clandestine rendezvous points, the hidden compartments where the processed whale meat was stored, destined for black markets across the globe. I discovered that the Northern Star was just one vessel in a larger, shadowy fleet, all engaged in this brutal, illegal trade, driven by insatiable greed. When Whittied, he finally returned to port. The icy winds of the Arctic a stark contrast to the warmth of civilization. I had amassed a horrifying collection of evidence. I contacted the authorities, my voice trembling as I recounted the tale of the Northern Star's bloody secret. I provided them with everything: my photographs, clandestine video recordings, detailed logs of their operations, and the coordinates of their hidden processing facilities. The investigation was swift and brutal. Captain Larson and his crew were arrested, their illegal whaling operation dismantled. The Northern Star was impounded, her once gleaming hull now stained with the indelible mark of cruelty. The processed whale meat, a testament to their barbarity, was seized, preventing it from reaching its illicit markets. I no longer work as a cruise ship photographer. The beauty of the ocean, once a source of endless inspiration, now carries the bitter tang of betrayal. I've dedicated my lens to environmental activism, using my skills to expose those who exploit the natural world. Sometimes when I see images of the pristine Arctic, a chill runs down my spine. I think of the Northern Star and the bloody harvest within her belly, a testament to how easily greed can corrupt, how quickly the pursuit of luxury can become a cloak for unspeakable cruelty. And I wonder, with a gnawing certainty, how many other ships are out there right now, sailing under the guise of legitimate research or tourism, secretly engaged in the brutal exploitation of the ocean's most vulnerable creatures. The ocean, vast and indifferent, holds many secrets, but some are so dark, so unforgivable, that they forever change your perception of humanity and the lengths to which some will go for profit. The Northern Star may have been exposed, but I know that somewhere in the world the demand for forbidden goods persists, and there are always tears, those willing to supply it at any cost. And the silence of the sea, once a comfort, now echoes with the cries of the innocent. My life had always revolved around the hushed reverence of art, the thrill of the gavel, the delicate dance of valuation and acquisition. As a seasoned art auctioneer, I'd presided over countless sales, from dusty estate clearances to glittering high-stakes events in exclusive galleries. The world of fine art, with its inherent beauty and occasional intrigue, was my domain. So, when I received an invitation to curate and conduct a series of exclusive art auctions aboard the Serene Seas, a new luxury cruise liner renowned for its discerning clientele, I saw it as a unique opportunity, a chance to blend my passion with the allure of the open ocean. I envisioned sophisticated evenings, polite bidding wars, and the gentle rocking of the ship as a backdrop to cultural exchange. I was, as it turned out, profoundly mistaken. The Serene Seas was indeed a marvel of design, a floating sanctuary of elegance and understated opulence. Her interiors were adorned with tasteful, if somewhat generic, contemporary art, and her lounges hummed with the quiet conversations of the wealthy and well-traveled. My initial auctions were a success, drawing a respectable crowd and fetching decent prices for the pieces I'd brought aboard. Captain Anderson, a man of stern demeanor but seemingly impeccable taste, often attended, his presence a silent endorsement of my work. Everything seemed to be unfolding as planned, a harmonious blend of business and pleasure. It was during the third week of my contract, as we sailed through the tranquil waters of the Aegean, that a subtle discord began to emerge. I noticed a pattern in the special consignments that began arriving for my auctions, pieces that were not part of the ship's original art collection, nor were they from my pre-arranged inventory. These were exquisite works, often of significant historical value, yet they arrived with an unsettling lack of provenance, their origins shrouded in vague, almost evasive explanations. My instincts, honed by years in the art world, screamed that something was amiss. True art, especially pieces of this caliber, always had a story, a documented history. These had none. My questions to the ship's purser, a nervous, shifty-eyed man named Mr. Davies, were met with polite but firm deflections. "Proprietary acquisition, sir," he'd stammer, his gaze darting away. "From a private collection. The owner prefers anonymity." The unease festered. One evening, after a particularly successful auction of a stunning Renaissance-era miniature that had seemingly materialized out of thin air, I decided to investigate. I had noticed that these special consignments were always delivered late at night, through a rarely used cargo hatch on Deck 1. Armed with my master key and a growing sense of dread, I made my way to the lower decks. The air grew colder, heavier as I descended, the polished elegance of the upper decks giving way to the raw, industrial heart of the ship. I found the cargo hatch, dimly lit by a single flickering bulb. The heavy steel door was ajar, and I could hear hushed voices from within. Peering through the narrow gap, my breath hitched. Inside, bathed in the harsh glare of portable worklights, were not just crates of art, but men in dark uniforms, their faces grim, their movements precise. They were carefully, almost reverently, unloading what appeared to be a priceless collection of ancient artifacts, sarcophagi, intricate gold masks, and delicate papyrus scrolls. These were not mere acquisitions. This was a sophisticated smuggling operation. And then I saw him. Mr. Petrov, a man who had been a frequent high-bidding presence at my auctions, a seemingly legitimate collector, was overseeing the entire operation, his eyes gleaming with a cold, calculating satisfaction. And standing beside him, giving orders, was Captain Anderson himself. The stern, impeccably tasteful captain was not just aware. He was complicit. He was the architect of this floating black market. I stumbled back, my mind reeling, the clatter of a loose tool on the metal floor echoing like a gunshot in the cavernous space. Petrov and Anderson's heads snapped towards the sound. I was caught. They brought me into the cargo hold, the air thick with the scent of ancient dust and illicit enterprise. Petrov, high, sculptured voice now laced with a chilling menace, explained their operation. The Serene Seas, this paragon of luxury, was a meticulously designed conduit for stolen art and artifacts plundered from war-torn regions and private collections across the globe. My auctions, they revealed, were not just a cover. They were a crucial part of the laundering process, legitimizing the stolen goods through a seemingly reputable channel. "Your expertise, my dear auctioneer," Petrov purred, "is invaluable. You lend an air of authenticity, a veneer of respectability to our acquisitions." They offered me a choice, a chilling echo of the choices offered to others caught in the ship's dark web. I could continue my role, my auctions now a deliberate act of complicity, and receive a substantial cut of the profits. Or I could disappear. They spoke of unfortunate accidents at sea, of rogue waves and slippery decks. The message was clear. Cooperate, or become another one of the ocean's silent secrets. I agreed, my heart a leaden weight in my chest, knowing that my survival and perhaps the chance to expose them depended on my unwilling performance. For the remainder of the cruise I played my part, a puppet on a string, my gavel now a tool of deception. I conducted auctions with a forced smile, my voice betraying none of the terror that gnawed at me. I learned the intricate details of their network, the coded language they used, the secret compartments hidden within the ship's vast hull. I discovered that the Serene Seas was just one cog in a much larger, international art trafficking ring, funded by shadowy collectors and facilitated by corrupt officials in various ports. When we finally docked in Venice, the city of art and intrigue, I had gathered enough evidence to bring their empire crashing down. I contacted Interpol, my voice a strained whisper as I recounted the tale of the floating black market. I provided them with everything: coded manifests, clandestine photos of the artifacts, even recordings of Petrov and Anderson discussing their illicit trade. The investigation was swift and decisive. Petrov, Captain Anderson, and dozens of crew members were arrested, their illicit gallery dismantled. The Serene Seas was impounded, her elegant facade now a symbol of greed and corruption. The stolen art, priceless pieces of human history, was recovered, destined to be returned to their rightful owners. I no longer work as an art auctioneer. The world of high art, once a source of profound joy, now carries the bitter tang of betrayal. I've retreated from the public eye, finding solace in a small, quiet gallery where I deal only in authenticated, ethically sourced pieces. Sometimes, when I see a cruise ship gliding majestically across the horizon, A chill runs down my spine. I think of the serene seas and the hidden gallery within her belly, a testament to how easily beauty can be corrupted, how quickly luxury can become a cloak for depravity. And I wonder, with a gnawing certainty, how many other ships are out there right now, sailing under the guise of leisure, secretly transporting the stolen treasures of the world, their dark secrets hidden beneath a veneer of opulence. The ocean, vast and indifferent, holds many secrets, but some are so dark, so insidious, that they forever change your perception of beauty and the lengths to which some will go to possess it. The serene seas may have been exposed, but I know that somewhere in the world the demand for forbidden art persists, and there are always those willing to supply it at any cost. And the silence of the sea, once a comfort, now echoes with the whispers of stolen histories.